The first time Ethan Caldwell showed up without his ATV, people noticed. Not because they cared what he drove, but because on a farm like his, you didn't just get rid of something that worked. You replaced it with something better. So when he pulled into Miller's supply yard one morning on foot, the questions started immediately. "Where's your ATV?" someone called out. Ethan didn't answer right away. He grabbed what he came for, fencing staples, mineral blocks, a few tools, and set them on the counter. Another voice chimed in. "Don't tell me you finally ran that thing into the ground." A few chuckles followed. Ethan paid, picked up his supplies, and turned toward the door. "Traded it," he said calmly. That got their attention. "For what?" one of the older farmers asked, stepping closer. Ethan paused just long enough. "For goats." The silence lasted about half a second. Then the laughter hit. Not quiet this time. Not subtle. "Goats?" someone repeated. "You traded a working ATV for goats?" "How many?" another asked, already grinning. "4. That made it worse. You gave up a machine for 4 animals that'll eat everything you don't want them to?" "They won't just eat it," another added. "They'll destroy your fences while they're at it." Ethan didn't argue, didn't explain. He just adjusted the box in his arms and walked out. The laughter followed him again. But like always, it stayed there. It didn't come home with him. Because Ethan had already done the math. And the math didn't lie. His farm had a problem. Not a sudden one. Not dramatic. But constant. Brush. Thick patches of overgrowth spreading across the edges of his land. Fence lines getting swallowed. Areas too uneven for tractors. Too dense for simple clearing. Too time-consuming to manage manually. For years, he had handled it the usual way. ATV. Fuel. Hours of slow clearing. Repeat. It worked. But it cost. Fuel alone added up faster than most people admitted. Maintenance wasn't far behind. And time. Time was the part no one tracked properly. Ethan did. And the numbers kept growing. So he changed the approach. Instead of forcing machines into terrain they weren't built for, he brought in something that was. The goats arrived that same afternoon. 4 of them. Not random. Not cheap. Selected carefully. Medium-sized, strong, active, and already used to rough terrain. They stepped out of the trailer with no hesitation, hooves hitting the ground like they already owned it. Ethan watched them quietly. No rush. No assumptions. Just observation. The first thing they did was exactly what he expected. They went straight for the brush. Not the grass. Not the easy patches. The thick stuff. The kind that had slowed him down for years. They didn't hesitate. Didn't test it. They just started eating. Ethan leaned against the fence, arms relaxed, watching. Because this wasn't about theory. This was about proof. The next morning, he put them to work properly. Section by section. Controlled movement. Temporary fencing set up to guide them through specific areas. Dense growth first, then moving outward toward lighter patches. It wasn't random grazing. It was planned. Measured. Intentional. The first week, no one came by. No one checked. Because no one expected anything to happen. But Ethan saw it. The difference was small at first. Then it wasn't. The thickest section along his eastern fence line, normally a full day's work with an ATV and cutting equipment, began to open up. Not cut. Not torn apart. But cleared. Evenly. Clean. The goats didn't rush. They worked constantly. Hour after hour, moving through the brush in a way no machine ever had. No fuel. No noise. No downtime. Just steady, consistent clearing. By the end of the second week, the change was visible from the road. That's when people started slowing down. At first, just glances. Then longer looks. Then eventually, stops. Mark was the first to walk over. He leaned against the fence, eyes scanning the cleared section. "You didn't do this with those goats," he said. Ethan didn't look up from adjusting a section of fencing. "They did." Mark shook his head slightly, stepping closer. "That whole stretch was packed last time I saw it." Ethan nodded. "Still is. Just not anymore." Mark watched the goats for a moment. They moved with purpose, heads down, chewing through brush, stepping over uneven ground without effort. No wasted movement. No hesitation. "How long?" Mark asked. 2 weeks. That made him pause. 2 weeks, he repeated. "That would have taken me at least 5 days with equipment. And that's if nothing breaks." Ethan stood, brushing his hands off. "Nothing breaks here." Mark let out a short breath, half laughing, half thinking. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Nothing to break." Word spread the same way it always did. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough. By the third week, more people had come by. Not to laugh this time. To look. To calculate. To understand. Ethan didn't explain much. He didn't need to. The land spoke for itself. Sections that had been overgrown for years were now open. Fence lines were visible again. Ground that had been difficult to even walk through was now manageable. And the goats kept working. No schedule. No complaints. No cost beyond what they needed to stay healthy. By the end of the first month, Ethan had cleared nearly half of the problem areas on his farm. Not by force. Not by spending more. But by choosing something better suited for the job. One afternoon, as he checked the latest section, Mark walked up again, this time slower. Less skeptical. More thoughtful. "How much you saving doing this?" he asked. Ethan leaned slightly against the fence, eyes still on the goats. "Fuel alone," he said. "About $300 a week." Mark's eyebrows lifted slightly. "And time?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Then, "More than that." Mark nodded slowly, because he understood what that meant. Time wasn't just hours. It was opportunity. Less maintenance. Less repair. Less wasted effort. He looked back out at the field. Then at Ethan. "You really think they can clear all of it?" Ethan followed his gaze across the remaining land. Patches still thick, still waiting. Then he looked back at the goats. Working. Steady. Unstoppable in their own quiet way. "They already are," he said. Mark didn't argue, because at that point, there wasn't anything left to argue about. But the real test hadn't come yet, because clearing sections slowly was one thing. Clearing everything, under pressure, was something else entirely. And that moment was coming faster than anyone expected. The pressure didn't build slowly. It arrived all at once. A notice came through the county office at the start of June. Dry conditions, rising temperatures, and an increased risk of brush fires across unmanaged land. It wasn't a warning people could ignore. Any property with heavy overgrowth, especially along fence lines and road edges, had to be cleared or reduced fast. Not eventually. Immediately. For most farmers, that meant one thing. Machines. ATVs back in motion. Fuel tanks filled. Days spent cutting, hauling, and burning through thick brush as quickly as possible before the heat worsened. And for most, it wasn't going well. Engines overheated in the midday sun. Blades dulled quickly against dense growth. Fuel burned faster than expected. Repairs stacked up. Time slipped away. The same people who had laughed at Ethan weeks earlier were now working longer hours than they had planned for. And still, falling behind. Ethan saw the shift almost instantly. More trucks on the road. More equipment moving. More frustration in the way people worked. But on his land, nothing changed. The goats didn't know about county notices. They didn't respond to pressure. They just kept doing what they had been doing from the start. Eating. Clearing. Moving forward. Ethan adjusted his system. He expanded their working zones, tightening the rotation pattern to cover more ground without losing control. Temporary fencing shifted faster now, twice a day instead of once, guiding the goats into the thickest remaining sections. Still no rush, just efficiency. By the end of the first week under the new pressure, he was ahead, not slightly, clearly. The eastern and southern edges of his property were already cleared. Fence lines were visible, clean, and manageable. The fire risk reduced. Meanwhile, across the road, machines were still running, still struggling. Mark showed up again one afternoon, wiping sweat from his neck as he leaned against the fence. "You're done over here?" he asked, looking across the cleared stretch. "Almost," Ethan replied. Mark let out a low whistle. "I've been running my ATV 10 hours a day. Still got another section I haven't even touched." Ethan nodded once. He understood that cycle. He had lived it. Mark watched the goats for a moment. They were working through a dense patch along the far fence, moving steadily, chewing through thick brush that would have slowed down any machine. "No breakdowns," Mark said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "No fuel," Mark added. Another shake. Mark exhaled slowly. "No overtime either." Ethan didn't say anything, because that part was obvious. The goats didn't stop at sunset. They didn't slow down when it got hot. They just kept going. The next few days pushed everything further. The heat climbed, the ground dried, and the pressure across the county intensified. 2 farms reported small brush fires. Nothing major, but enough to make everyone move faster. Faster than their machines were built for. That's when the breakdowns got worse. One afternoon, a truck pulled into Ethan's driveway faster than usual. It was Carl this time. He stepped out with a look Ethan recognized immediately. Not frustration, Not panic. Calculation. How far along are you? Carl asked. Ethan glanced toward the last remaining section of thicker growth near the northern edge. Another week, he said. Carl nodded once, eyes scanning the cleared land behind him. Then he asked the question directly. You think those goats could handle more? Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked back at the animals, then at the land, then at Carl. How much more? Carl gestured toward his property across the road. About 20 acres of the worst of it. Thick, uneven. My equipment's not cutting it fast enough. Ethan thought for a moment, then nodded. We can rotate them through. Carl let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Appreciate it. That evening, Ethan adjusted the fencing again. The system expanded. The goats didn't notice the difference. New section, new brush. Same work. Carl's land was tougher. Thicker growth. More uneven terrain. Exactly the kind of ground machines struggled with. Exactly the kind the goats handled without hesitation. Within 3 days, the difference showed. Carl stood at the edge of his field, arms crossed, watching the transformation happen faster than anything he had tried. You're telling me this cost you less than running an ATV? He asked. Ethan nodded. Carl shook his head slowly. I burned through almost $1,000 in fuel this month alone. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to, because Carl could see it. Not just in the land, but in the numbers behind it. By the time the county did its follow-up checks, Ethan's property passed without question. So did Carl's. Others. Not all. Some made it. Some didn't. The difference wasn't effort. It wasn't work ethic. Everyone had worked hard. The difference was approach. By the end of the second month, Ethan finished the last of his original problem areas. All 60 acres. Cleared. Not rushed. Not forced. But completed in a way that would hold. The land wasn't just cut down. It was managed. Sustainable. And the cost was clear. Fuel saved. Maintenance avoided. Time recovered. When he finally sat down and added everything up, the number came out simple. $12,500. Not estimated. Not guessed. Tracked. Real. Mark came by one last time that week. He didn't lean on the fence this time. He walked straight up beside Ethan and looked out over the cleared land. All that, from 4 goats, he said. Ethan nodded once. Mark let out a small laugh. They really laughed at you for that trait. Ethan glanced back toward the road briefly, then back at the field. They usually do, he said. Mark shook his head, but there was no disbelief left in it now. Just understanding. Across the road, a few trucks slowed as they passed. Drivers looked over. Not at the goats. Not at the fences. But at the land. Clean. Open. Managed. The result spoke louder than anything else. Ethan stepped forward, checking one last section of fencing as the goats moved into their next patch, without hesitation. No noise. No engines. No wasted motion. Just quiet, steady work. The kind most people overlooked. Until it outperformed everything they trusted. And somewhere along the road, the laughter that had followed him weeks earlier had disappeared completely, replaced by something far more valuable. Because on a farm where every decision mattered, Ethan hadn't traded down. He had chosen right, and the land had proven it.